Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the next campaign diary for Rise of Tiamat. We are still in Chapter 2, and I think we still got a ways to go in Chapter 2, so maybe the next campaign diary is still going to be covering the events from Chapter 2. It is a dungeon crawl after all, so there's a lot that can happen in this particular chapter, but we haven't even gotten to the dungeon crawl just yet. So we played last Friday, and let me tell you, a lot of it was combat. It was combat oriented. I'll put some images up of the tabletop simulator map that I used, and how things went down. I'm not going to describe everything in combat because, come on, that's just boring and nobody wants to hear all that. I'll give you some highlights and some things that became a little bit challenging for me, and some of the changes I've made, but that's really about it. I don't want to spend too much time waxing philosophical about how many times someone swung their hammers and how important that really was. But anyway, we finished the last the last session with the characters going up against the squid. I'll put a little image up here. You can see the demonized squid that I illustrated, a couple weeks ago and used as a token for Tabletop Simulator. And we had to continue that combat. And again, not in the book, something I put in. Matter of fact, the squid encounter is a random encounter that you can have on the way to the Sea of Ice. And it's really nothing more than just a tentacle that comes out or a few tentacles that you can deal with. I decided to change that up a little bit more and give it a little bit more of a menace and a purpose to being there. So they are fighting this thing, and this is when I started changing up a lot of my tactics for really probably the rest of this campaign and how I'm going to be doing things. I actually warned my players as we sat down to play that night before I played all my radio dramas and cutscenes to say, hey, look, just as a heads up, from this point on, things are going to change. I'm actually adding things to my enemies now that make them more robust. Things like bonus actions and additional actions and reactions and all kinds of things they're going to be having. So just to, heads up, you might want to, use some strategy here, not go full bore, burning up all your spells. Just know that I am changing the way I do things. Well, I started to implement that last Friday, and I think there was a huge difference in how things panned out. So they were fighting the squid, and ultimately they won against the squid. Matter of fact, the squid did not die. It just got knocked down to so many hit points, it lost quite a few of its tentacles and escaped, right? So it left. But anyway, he had some spells, he had some reactions, he had some different things going on. And unfortunately, every single spell that I shot off missed. I mean, I could have fudged it, but I didn't, and I just kept missing it over and over and over again. But I did have some interesting reactions that were built into the squid. If the characters had sheathed or cleaved one of the tentacles down to almost 0 hit points, that tentacle would drop, go through the ice and disappear, while the other tentacles slam down on the ice, causing everybody to lose their footing and go prone with a very high dex check to see if they could even, stay on their feet when that happened. I had built in another reaction about ink spray, but I totally forgot about it while I was playing. But it wasn't an easy combat, right? They managed to drive it off, but some new things were happening. I was kind of giving them a little hint that things are going to be changing as we go forward. So they ended up defeating the ice squid. It left this huge crater in the glacier where it sunk back down. All the tentacles came with it, and it disappeared. And there was a moment where Storm, our frost giant, really wanted to go down there. He wanted to follow it and finish it off. And let me tell you, as a DM, no, I did not have that prepared. I didn't have anything like that prepared. But it was at the table, I remember thinking, okay, interesting, let's do this. I'm ready for this. In Tabletop Simulator, I'll put a little image up here. You can see I made a tabletop. I've had this now for over a year. It's just a blank tabletop with a grid, kind of like how you would roll a mat out onto a table just to play D&D as normal with your markers and minis. And I always have this in reserve in case something happens. So if you're running Tabletop Simulator, maybe you're just getting into it and you're making all these maps, always have like this basic battle mat table ready to go. And you could just type at Google and find all the grids and whatnot and textures that you would need to do all that. It's pretty easy. But I was ready for that. I was ready, to do this if they wanted to. And after some talking with the players, they kind of worked it out in themselves. They decided not to, which is fine. I would have ran with it. It would have been interesting. It would have been random, that's for sure, but I would have done it, Anyway, so they're debating all this. And now while they're debating this, they are being surrounded by the ice villagers, these tribal ice villagers. Now the book talks about this. They're like ice hunters or whatnot, and there's a village there that's on the glacier. Now, frankly, look, I don't like to cuss in my videos. I've got better things to do than sit here and drop F-bombs and all kinds of stuff all day for you. But let me tell you, the villagers in the book are pretty much assholes. I mean, no matter what they're doing, they're being jerks. Even when they're being nice to your face, they're being jerks. It's just, I didn't like how these things were set up. I'm sure there was a reason for it. It's not to slam the campaign or the writers of the campaign that it was a poor choice, anything like that. I just thought they were just such assholes, and I didn't really want to do that. I decided to change it up. So maybe as a DM, this could be some advice for you. But I actually had them more subjugated. They were living in fear. They weren't just buttheads to be buttheads. They were living in fear of the masters and of the dragon. And everything that happens on the glacier or their home has to be looked through the lens of, just what's this dragon doing? If we do this, does it upset the dragon? Do we do this? Does it upset the orcs? By the way, I changed all the kobolds in the glacier and even in the dungeon crawl to orcs. I wanted to get away from the kobolds. I don't know, it didn't make any sense to me that kobolds would be like in an ice, cold, frigid environment. It felt like the orcs with their armor and their furs, that made a little more sense to me. So maybe that's a choice for you as a DM. You can go back in and change that. But they've seen plenty of kobolds. They were in all throughout the first book. And I felt like the ice environment just didn't really lend to their sensibilities or where they would be hanging out. So anyway, I changed the attitudes of a lot of the villagers. Now, they were surrounded by the hunters. One in particular hunter, I'll put his image up here, Horo, I believe is his name, who is one of the ice chieftains. He's a hunter chieftain, right? So he's not really the top of the clan, but they heard the noise, right? And they were out hunting and they came across this. They knew the guardian had been disturbed, so they went to go check it out. And of course, here are these players or these characters just hanging around. Now, here's what I did to try to spice things up a little bit. A week before we played, I asked everybody, okay, through our Facebook group, what languages do you speak? And I compiled them all, and I settled on one, Draconic, because of these villagers probably picked up a lot of that stuff because of their masters and having to speak this language. So what I did at the table was, here they were in the blizzard, in the snow. Suddenly they get these glimpses of villagers with long spears just standing there watching them. And Horo, the hunter chieftain, walks up to them. He's kind of aggressive. He knows they're intruders. He knows like this can be an issue. Here's these people here, and they could piss off the dragon. We could be in a dangerous situation here. So anyway, what I did, and this is not revolutionary, but what I did to create a language barrier is I had my laptop out already because I was running Tabletop Simulator. And for those who could speak Draconic, I opened up a private message in Facebook, and everybody had their phones, and we conversed back and forth. They would ask me questions, or I'd ask them questions through typing. I didn't want to text. Texting was too slow. But I typed, and we had this like 15, 20-minute conversation where half the group understood what was being said. The other half did not know what was going on. They had to be translated back and forth. So that was a really easy way of doing that, just having that kind of private message open. And there was a lot of debating going on back and forth and persuasions going on back and forth. Horo was clearly antagonistic in a lot of ways. He didn't care for these people, and he saw them as a threat. And he wanted to take them prisoner. So after negotiations and translations going back and forth at the table, they eventually went to the village. I'll put an image up here from Tabletop Simulator. This is just a quick map I made of the overall village. You can see the little huts and the wood piles, which really shouldn't be there, but they're there. The wood piles and a stone in the center dedicated to the dragon, and a lot of other like fish barrels and different things that are scattered around the village. So they bring him to the village, and Horo brings them to the shaman. I'll put an image up here. As a matter of fact, here's a whole bunch of images from my Google Slides. Again, I had this Google Slides up above me on my 55-inch television, so everybody could see and get a taste of what these villagers looked like, their dress, and of course what the shaman and her wolf look like. And they go into the hut, and this is where another negotiation happens. There's a lot of skill checks here, not immediately, because even the shaman was ready to take them prisoner because she could not risk it. She is the head of the clan in a spiritual sense, but there's still a chieftain. Horo will listen to her to some extent, but they don't get along very well. And there really is a reason for this. I don't want to get into it in the campaign diary just in case it's kind of figured out later. But even she is a little antagonistic. She's more willing to listen than Horo was. But she even understands that, look, if you piss off the dragon, you will be killed and so will we. He could come and just wipe us all out. We will all suffer. If not the dragon, we will be suffer from under our masters. And that's when they discovered that a lot of these villages was under the thumb of the orcs who were serving the dragon in a protection of this person, Macceth the Crimson. So they were aware of her. Matter of fact, our thief here, Thimbraeus, was from the same race. So that kind of piqued their interest. Like, oh my gosh, here's another one that has come from the ice who may be a sorcerer as well. And will the dragon come for him like it did Macceth, or at least brought Macceth to them? So there was a little of hesitation on everybody's part. So what we did was everybody was kind of talking. We role played for a little bit, but then we started doing those persuasion checks, the skill checks that were important to the conversation. And Storm did a really good job here, I think, just bringing out a lot of tribal artifacts that he had all the way back from chapter 6 in Horde of the Dragon Queen that the lizard folk gave them for helping them fight against the castle in Natier, or Natier, or whatever the heck it's called, the castle in the swamp. So that was actually, I thought, pretty clever. That had happened. It wasn't something I was anticipating. Matter of fact, I forgot about it. I totally forgot about it as a DM. So that was really, really good. So the persuasion checks were, my DC number was really low on that. And I think also I gave him advantage. I can't remember now. But that was clever stuff. So that actually persuaded her more into their story and why they were there. And maybe she was feeling more, she was feeling more confident that maybe they could get rid of the dragon. Maybe they could free them or give them time to get the heck out of there, right? So another thing I've adopted for this chapter 2, and you don't have to do this, but I also, the masters required a sacrifice. Gosh, I never turn off my phone. Man, Anyway, what was I saying? Okay, so the masters require a sacrifice. They require a woman from the village. It's a very classical stuff, nothing too crazy here, but they demand a sacrifice to the dragon. And in this situation, right before the heroes came, the shaman's daughter was taken. So there was a good chance that she might be alive. So the shaman was willing to make a pact with him. I will show you to the lair, because the lair will not have itself be found. So she agreed to lead them to the lair if they would not only just go rescue the red-horned one, but bring back her daughter as well. So they were making this deal, and then all of a sudden, out in the village come the masters. I'll put a little image up here. I had used a lot of 3D tokens and whatnot for this, but the masters had come because they heard the commotion. They heard the great guardian screaming, the ruckus that had happened. And so at first, the shaman thought, wait a minute, you're too early for your tribute. Another thing the villagers have to give, they have to give a tribute to the orcs, which is food, whale oil, things like that, to keep them alive. But this patrol had come out, and Horo, unfortunately, was out there talking to them. Now, at that point, Horo had not quite given everybody away, but the players decided to sneak out the back of the tent and kind of get a view on what was happening out there. And they saw 8 orcs and an ice troll, which I used some big 3D tokens for these. And this is where things got really dicey. This is probably one of the most brutal combats I've had in a long time with what happened next, because you got to remember the characters just defeated the demon squid and they hadn't rested. So we're already suffering from low levels, spell levels, and also hit points. So they were setting up, and they could see Horo talking to one of the orc chieftains. The orcs are upset because they know something's going on. Something happened because the guardian, this ruckus that was happening out there. And the shaman's upset because he doesn't want Horo to turn these people over, but there's just this conflict going on. The thief climbs up one of the towers. I'll put an image up here. You can see the tower there. He climbs up there and attaches a new piece of equipment he has for his gun to turn it into a rifle because he wants to get into a sniping position. And he takes out his barrel full of gunpowder, which he got from his bag of holding. And everybody kind of just gets themselves situated. But right where things are starting to heat up, and they can't quite hear everything that's being said, Storm walks out and kind of reveals everybody, like, okay, now they know these new people are there. And that's when the combat started, guys. That's when, the crap hit the fan. And this was a pretty rough combat. Only one person dropped during the whole thing. That was Lucius, our paladin. Unfortunately, quite a bit happened to him before he went down. So he took quite a bit of abuse. But it was actually fun and engaging. Matter of fact, I didn't use a lot of my new tactics, funny enough, in that combat. Though I did do a lot of flanking and having enemies use their full movement so they didn't have an action at the end. But moving their full movements to get them into position, crawling up the towers, getting behind the players by running behind the village tents and whatnot to get into position. There were a lot of things that happened. The ice troll kind of went pretty early, and he saw the Thimbraeus, the thief, up in the tower. So he picks up an entire wood stock that was kind of netted together and throws it towards the players. And it ends up hitting the tower, not knocking it down, but cracking it, depleting some hit points and making it lean. And then, because the trolls have like 3 attacks, he walks over, picks up a couple fish barrels, and throws the fish barrels at the tower as well, hitting it 3 more times, or I think 2 more times, causing it to even go even further. And our Thimbraeus on his turn jumped out of the thing and landed in the snow and did his move at that point, his action. But the whole time, this tower, throughout the entire combat, is leaning more and losing more hit points until it finally does collapse near the end. And unfortunately, it fell on Lucius. And it hit him hard, of course, knocked him prone. He had to get out of that. And as soon as he got out of that, he got surrounded by 2 more orcs this is late in the combat, and went down. He suffered quite a bit towards the end there. But it was just a tough, brutal combat because everybody was near death the entire time. I at one point rolled 4 20s in a row. And luckily, the cleric who can negate those 20s and turn them to 19s, I tell you one thing, that saved them several times because everybody was so clustered together. Now, one clever thing that was done, another thing I think as a DM that I need to try to look, okay, how do I overcome this, was the thief cast darkness on himself. He has the ability to see through the darkness, so he has darkness all around him, and he just kept moving to enemy and hacking them to pieces because they couldn't see. They couldn't see what was attacking them. And of course, this also created a little bit of a problem for the players too because everybody was so close together that they also could not see. But he was able to go through person by person and make solid attacks. So it was a bit tricky. And of course, the orcs are not going to stay in that cloud of black smoke. They want to get the heck out of there. So I would roll an 8-sided die in which direction they would go on the grid, and they would run that direction to get the heck out of there. At one point, I had a orc who had 2 hit points left, and he was stuck in darkness. And I just rolled the random die, and he ran straight into one of the tents. Now, the tents are made of like ivory bone and different things from whales and other creatures. I mean, if you run solid into these things, you run a high risk of impalement. I mean, if you're just going full bore, and that's exactly what he did. His last 2 hit points, he was right next to Yithriel, who was just shrouded in darkness. She couldn't see anything, and she had taken several hits at this point. All of a sudden, heard next to her some orc run into the tent and just let out a gory scream as he lost his life impaled on a whale tent. So there was a lot that happened. The ice troll unfortunately died pretty early in the combat, but it was nasty. It was just a nasty combat. And now here we are at the end of the combat. All the orcs are destroyed finally. It took a long time to wipe these guys out. Horo, near about 3/4 of the way through, betrayed them, or at least it looked like betrayal. He decided to fight with the orcs, and he knocked the shaman out because she objected to this, but he's operating out of fear. A lot of these villagers are operating out of fear, and they see, suddenly the hero's getting upper hand. Oh my gosh, they could kill these people and that could cause major problems for us. So he goes in and attacks. And funny enough, the thief used his manacles that he got again back in Horde of the Dragon Queen that I totally forgot about, and manacled Horo while he was in darkness. And Horo couldn't see what was going on. So they've captured Horo. They've killed all the orcs. The place is a disaster right now. And that's kind of where we ended it. That was session number 3, chapter 2, the first portion. Now, as you can see, I've changed up quite a bit. I've changed the enemy types. I boosted not necessarily their AC, but their HP, and also kind of gave them a little more reactions to things. Matter of fact, I haven't really quite implemented all my new tactics. That's coming a little bit later, actually, in this chapter when they get down into the lair. So there's quite a bit that changed here. You don't have to do this if you're running Rise of Tiamat, but it's just something that I decided to do. But anyway, guys, I think that's about it. That's, it was a long combat, and now we're at the end of it, and we play this Friday in 2 days, and everybody is pretty wiped out. I mean, spells are spent, people are close to death, and I have to be honest, I don't mind putting this in the campaign diary. There's no way anybody's getting 8 hours of rest. There's just no way. It can't happen. So this is going to be a tricky endeavor as they go and try to find Macceth the Crimson in the next portion of this campaign. All right, guys, that's it. That's all I got for you. Next videos will be chapter tips, eventually, cutscenes, and of course the next campaign diary after we play this Friday. All right, guys, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.